Hello everyone. So my name is Nav and I'm working as a mobile software engineer at Manulife. And on the behalf of GDG Rotoma, I welcome everybody who is joining this special event from your homes. And this is the first time you are experiencing virtual DevFest. And yeah, this is a little bit about myself. And I also work sometimes as a the estimator, like mentoring student projects. And apart from my job, I love to read novels, watching Netflix, and going to gym. And I hope you all are safe. And so in this today's talk, I will talk about in-app review API, which is launched this year, I think a little 2 months earlier, or probably 1 month. I didn't know the exact time, but this is a big demand from the developer community from Android to getting something from the native solution for getting the user feedbacks in their apps. So finally, the in-app API, the Play Store, the Google Play team, they launch a new API for Android developers to make their life easier to get to hear the user feedback in a more robust way. So before actually explaining the review API, I would like to discuss about what's the current situation to get the user feedback and what are the challenges that the Play API tries to resolve for us. So the first issue is like right now in Android side or in Android world, we don't have any native solution that I already explained for prompting the user for getting their feedback. As compared to iOS, they have some kind of there is already a existed solution that they show a dialogue kind of thing, and user can give the feedback within your app. They will not actually going outside the current scope. So within your app, they can give just a star rating, or they can also add their comments. But in Android, we have third-party libraries, and even with those libraries, we can what we just can do is like we just prompt the user, and then if they want to rate us, we just redirect them to the Play Store, which is like a really bad experience, like pushing your users out of your app, and and after that, if we don't get any information like if they rate our app or not. And the second thing, it's more about from the user perspective. Like we feel lazy even if we consider ourselves. We don't want to go Play Store for a specific app to give their ratings. So we just do our stuff like our day-to-day jobs in our apps. Like if you are using bank app, we do our transactions and that's it. We don't go to leave any comments. And the third thing is like we like to shout only for bad things. So it's about like our users, if they get frustrated with your app, they will go to the app store, like, and then they give you the ratings, which is bad ratings or bad reviews, like this functionality is not working. So most of the time, the users, those are like those who get the better user experience, or those are able to finish their process like completely in a well mannered. So they will don't go, and they just simply do their stuff, done their job is done, and they will just finish, and they will don't go to the Play Store to give you a feedback or just sharing their experience how they're using your app. So these are the main challenges that what I have found so far, and these are going to be resolved by the new API that is in-app review API, and it's by a Google Play team. And what are the main advantages? This is a native solution, and user will able to rate your app from within your app, so you can just launch the process at any specific time in your app. So like use case you can say is like if the transaction is successfully done, like the transfer is done or user is able to successfully order their cart and all that stuff, and you can just trigger the app review a flow, and the user can go from there and they can just do whatever they want within your app, so they will not go outside your app. And the third thing is easy integration. So there are hardly like 5 to 7 steps to implement this API. So if your app is already using some kind of mechanism to launching the review, any from the settings, because most of the time we put some kind of menu item in the drawer or under the more options, from where your user tap on that menu item, and we push them to the Play Store. But in this case, it's just you can launch it at anywhere, and within just a few minutes, your user is you can they can able to get to give the feedback to our apps. And there are some details that I would like to discuss for the API. So it basically has three major components. The first one is Review Manager, and it's a interface. It lets your app to start an in-app review flow. And this is the first step that we need to, when we need to launch our flow, we first need to get the Review Manager. And based on the Review Manager, the next step is getting the request task, and it returns us the review info object, which is needed to start the in-app review process flow. So request task, basically it's asynchronous by the API, so we don't need to care. Like you can launch it from like a main thread, but the API will handle for us how to get the information. Basically, the review info object, it gets the user information from the Play Store, because when you launch, the final step is the launching the review flow, and in that flow or in the UI, we show the user details like their image and their name, and all those details, those are get from the API to fetch from the Play Store, and the request task is doing that for us. And it basically returns us the task which gives us the review info object. And the review info object is the last major component of this API, which is used to launch the in-app review flow. And after like those are the main components, and then there are some major requirements that must be met before you start integrating this into your apps. The first one is the Play Core library requirement. And to integrate it in your app, you must use a version 1.8.0 or higher of a Play Core library. And the second one is device requirements. It supports API level 21 and higher. So it's basically Android 5.0 that have a Google Play Store installed, which is like almost all the devices or all the Android OSs already have. And then the second, for Chrome operating systems, they must have the Google Play Store installed to use this functionality. Now, that's the small explanation, or I can say details for the API. Now we can see the implementation, and we'll see how we can integrate it into our app. And it's just a very less code, and you can easily implement it in within a 10-15 minutes. So as I mentioned first, like the first thing is we need to get the review manager object, and this code, the examples that I pasted here, it's written in Kotlin. So if you are not familiar with Kotlin, you can just check the Kotlin docs just for this is just a small things that you can just check this is just a beginner level coding for in Kotlin. If you are in Java, you can still able to understand this. Like val is basically the final in Java. So yeah, so we get the review manager, and we get it using the review manager factory. And then the second step, we call the request review flow, which is on the manager that we get in the first step. And once we get the request review flow, we add the completion listener on that request, if you see here. And if the request successfully done, we will launch a review info. We will get the review info object by checking the condition if the request is successfully completed. And then the last step is like, at this point, we have our manager or the review info object. That means we have the user details that the final step needs to populate the UI. And now we can launch the review flow using the review info manager that we get from the first step. And launch review flow, it take two parameters. The first one is the context from where you are launching. It can be your application, or it can be your fragment or activity from where you want to launch your flow. And the second parameter is the review info object that we get in the second step, the request in when the request task is successfully done. And the last, we get the flow, and it also gives us the task back, but the task, it doesn't give us any information, because this is the API limitations, or they explained it as a term like user privacy. They don't want to give developers any information if user rate their app, or what rating they did, or what comments they posted for their rating. So it's just a flow. It's just we get that if you need to trigger something after your flow is completed, but actually we don't get any information. Like the flow just finished, we only know this thing, but we don't know whether the user reviews us, or even whether the review dialog was shown or not. Let's say if it's the first time is already shown and user don't want to give us, so API, it puts some kind of quota limits. It's mentioned in the API documentation. I added the links in the references that you can see later. So we don't get any information if the review is given or not, or even the dialog is shown to the user or not. So these are there are some limits that are implemented, or I can say added by the API team to make it a more look more like don't abusing the user, like prompting like a every time, or like a multiple times in a single year kind of stuff. So but they didn't provide any information like what limits those are. Maybe like iOS doing, they have like 3 times in a year they can they can show the rating in your app to give the ratings. But in the play team, they didn't provide us the documentation details about how that quota works. And yeah, these are the main steps. So the first step is getting the review manager. The second step, we get the request using the request review flow. And then on the success, when the request is successfully done, in the result we have review info that we receive here. And the third step is launching review flow using that review info object and the manager. And then from there, you can see final step is like the app API will, when when you launch the review flow, it will check if the quota limits are valid. And if you want to put your own conditions on top of those, like checking the versions, or if you want to only call the launch review flow after successfully 4 or 5 transactions done by the user, or actually like any conditions you want, you can put on top of the quota. But there is a quota, so if you don't want to put any conditions, Google will handle some more some use cases or some edge cases for you. But again, the details are not revealed with us. That's just for the user privacy concerns are there. So that's all about the testing. and And there is one thing that I forgot to mention. When we call the request review flow, it might take some time because it's going to get the user details from your from the Play Store. So it's a better practices, like if you trigger the request review flow or in early steps of your app, maybe on create of your first activity, rather than just calling it before you want to launch your review, because it might take some time, and at that time user might leave your application or might leave at that specific activity or fragment. So just to be on the safe side, if we call request review flow beforehand, it's a better, and user will not see any kind of UI freezes, or it will not take any time because it's already loaded. And when you call the launch review flow, you will see like a minimum delay on the UI side, and user will able to easily give you feedback to your app. And the next thing is testing, and there are many ways that those are explained or those are documented by the team. So we have basically 3 ways to test this API. The first one is like in a code. If you want to just to test it in the coding side, but I didn't find any value doing this because it doesn't stimulate the UI, so you cannot see actually what's happening. And it's a review manager that you just need to replace with the fake review manager, and you get the review manager, and it will know what it will do is it only fakes the API method results by always providing the fake review info object. And it returns you the success state every time. So every time it lands you to this part, add on complete, like down the flows add completion listener, and you can only see, or you can only see what's happening in here, and nothing else you can test with this one. So this is only testing the happy path. Like you can assume that you get the review info, you get everything, and then at the last, it just execute the add-on completion listener, which is here. So it's just a testing kind of a happy path, and I didn't find much value in this way. And the next way is the internal app sharing, and this is on the Play Store. What we do is we create a APK or app bundle, whatever the format or version you are doing for your apps, and you create a app bundle or APK, and you push it to the internal app sharing, and from there you can share those APKs with your testers that you already added into your Play Store account. And in this case, at least we get the APIs, we are able to get the simulation of the UI. Like you actually, we can interact with the UI, like how it looks like, and it will able to fetch your user details from the Play Store, and it will show you how your rating widget is going to be look on top of your UI. So in this case, but the limitation of this channel, like the internal app sharing, like you cannot able to submit the feedback from this channel. So the submit button is disabled, but you can interact with other components like the rating widget. You can rate, or you can write comments, and you can dismiss the dialog. There is a cancel and submit button. And the third one is internal testing track. So if you already have published your app on the Play Store, and you can test with the internal testing track, you can push your APK or app bundle there, and then from there your testers will get the bundle that you just posted over there, and from there you can test the full flow. And in this case, it's a it's really working like a real life scenario, I can say, because in this case we can able to submit the feedback, and and in the Play Store that feedback is not going to be published on the Play Store, but you can actually see it in the Play console that your testing feedback is there. So you can delete, or just to for the testing purpose you can use this channel. And I found these two channels more valuable than the first one, which is just like faking the whole API and then just testing what's executed or not at the final last step. So I did testing with internal app sharing one, but I didn't test it with internal testing track. And this is all about the implementation part, like the testing and how you can integrate it into your apps. And this is the flow chart, and this is the UI that you can just imagine, because the Google Play team, they advise like don't abuse the API by adding some kind of your own logic to just to check like what user gives you, or just for the tracking purposes. So they want us to use only whatever is given by the API, just launch the review, and then API will handle everything for us. and and the first step is like when the launch review object is there, when you call the launch review flow, the first step is they will show the bottom dialog fragment here, and with the user details that's fetched from the Play Store. And you can see there are three options. They when they tap on the some ratings, they will see the optional comments if the user wants to add, and then cancel and submit. And once they submit, then the final stage is like thanks, and the user can undo their actions if they don't want to post it, or they by mistaken posted something wrong, or whatever they want. Still there is the last step, there is option to redo the stuff that they just did. So this is basically all about the details and how you can use this API in your projects. I can show the demo, like how it looks like. I tested with my sample app here. I will show you just in a sec. So I created some sample app and I put it in the internal app sharing. And you can see it grabs the information from Play Store. And this is an internal app sharing. As I said, you can't submit the feedback, but at least you can see the three components are enabled, like the cancel and stars and the comments. So this is how it looks like in internal app sharing testing channel. Yeah, so this is how the UI looks like. And just sec. In the implementation purpose, although I added the code or everything in there, but I still want to show you guys like how it's going to be easily integrated into your app. So this is the first step. We get the review manager. Like in here, I'm checking the build config just for the first testing that I mentioned, like using the fake review manager. So if it's in the debug mode, I use the fake review manager. And if it's the production one or any other build variant, I use the review manager. I mean, the actual review manager that will be used to trigger the launch review flow. So this is the first step, get the review manager here. Then the second step is getting the review info object on the successful completion of this request. And request review flow, if you see the definition of this method here, it gives us the task which has review info when it's finished. So this is kind of a callback, and once the request is a completion, we added the completion listener. Once it's successfully done, this is the fourth step. We get the review info object from the result of that request. And the fifth step is like when we have the review info object, we use the manager that we get earlier and then launching the review flow. And the sixth one is like if you want to do something when the flow is finished. And again, here we don't get any information. So you just want, if you want to track whatever you are doing here, or you want to continue with whatever your user is currently doing, so you can continue with that. And if the something went wrong, you can still doing the same thing that you want to do here, because it's basically there is no any difference between those two conditions. It's basically else is like when we don't have any information about the launch review flow, or if something went wrong. I mean, if user is not connected and we are not able to get any information to launch the review flow. So this is all the implementation part is just six steps to integrate it into your apps. Yeah, so this is all about this API, and I added the references here. These are the main major references, and here in this medium link, the last one, they explained the way, or the guidelines, like how quota things work and why they don't want to reveal the information related to that, like what are the conditions that the API checking by itself when we call the launch review flow. And you can I already posted these I shared these slides with the team. They will post it on their channel. And if that's all from my side, thank you everyone. And if you have any questions, I'm here. Just you can post it on the chat and we will discuss them here. Thank you, everyone.